This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It's the 1st of March as we welcome you to Real Talk. It's great to be back in the chair. It's great to be back in the studio with my man, John Hicks. After a couple of days away, good morning to you.
Yeah, well rested.
Did you manage to allow yourself a couple of minutes to just chill out and leave work behind?
You ordered me to. I said, can I come in and work? You said, absolutely not.
No, that's right. Well, I'm glad you had a couple of days away.
Thank you.
It was my pleasure to be at the Alberta Tourism Advocacy Summit for the past couple of days, sitting down, interviewing two party leaders that we're going to be talking a lot about today. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith and Rachel Notley, leader of Alberta's official opposition, in front of an engaged audience. These are the owner-operators, the advocates, the elected representatives. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people that participate in the advancement, the advocacy around tourism. We talked about budgets. We talked about building industry. We talked about solving staffing shortages. We talked about cutting red tape. We talked about attracting international and local visitors to areas that have great potential for rural economic development. It was a perfect pre-budget exercise, if you will, and I was happy to be there. And of course, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show, about a half hour from now, when our political panel convenes. Michael Solberg from New West Public Affairs was there with me at downtown Edmonton's JW Marriott Hotel and Conference Center yesterday. Calgary's Sun scribe Rick Bell is going to be joining us, checking in via Zoom, and political staffer Kristin Raworth, who's just added podcaster to her resume as well, is going to be rounding out our John, we're calling it Alberta's best budget breakdown.
There are going to be a lot of budget breakdowns today, but this is the best.
This is Alberta's best. That's coming up. We wanted to go to the front line, though, out of the gates. We wanted to get an understanding, a real-life assessment, maybe call it a diagnosis of what Alberta's $68 billion surplus budget means, or may mean, when it comes to healing healthcare. Dr. Shazma Mithani has been a wonderful friend of this show since inception. She's an ER doc at a hospital not far from here at Edmonton's Royal Alexandra. Your messaging, you've really made a name for yourself through the course of this pandemic as the host of Everyday ER on CBC, on your Instagram and your social media platforms. You also present Shift Perspectives, where you give people a peek inside the ER. It's so cool to have the doctor in the house today, visiting us in our Real Talk studio. Welcome.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
You got it. As an ER doc and as a human with a lot of obligations outside of work, do you have time? Do you actually sink your teeth into a budget document? What was yesterday like for you as Travis Taves presents this to Albertans?
Yeah, I really, because there is such a direct link to what is going to happen to my patients and myself and my colleagues on the front line, I really do try to pay attention to what's happening in terms of policy, in terms of course, the budget. And so I was paying attention to it specifically, of course, for healthcare and how it relates to the health of Albertans and to frontline doctors and other healthcare workers.
There's so many different storylines we'll pay attention to. I opened talking about tourism. People want to know about certain sectors and who will be getting boosts and maybe who's not getting exactly what they were looking for. In the context of healthcare, the government spends more on health and education than anything else. The numbers people need to know, really, after 3 years of trying to rein in spending on public services, cutting the size of the public service, this government is increasing healthcare spending by about 4%. That's close to $1 billion. Also looks like the number of employees with Alberta Health Services will grow by more than 3,500 from April of this year to March of next year. What's your diagnosis of the healthcare system right now? Nobody sees it quite like an ER doc.
I mean, I would say that we are nowhere near out of hot water right now. It is still very pressured. We're still seeing very high wait times, very high ambulance volumes, and very sick patients. We're not seeing very much COVID anymore, which is awesome. However, the care deficit, we kind of call it this care deficit that has been lingering since the pandemic, where people got sicker, people weren't seeking care. Now there are tons of Albertans without family doctors that are not able to provide that preventative care. It means that we see it in the emergency department, right? So someone who has diabetes that is not having a family doctor to care for their blood sugars, someone who has heart failure that isn't on the right medications to manage that, they're going to present to the emergency department instead. And we're certainly seeing that. We are still seeing very high wait times. And in terms of the budget in particular, I mean, we've talked about this before, Ryan. It's the human resources that are the most scarce in the healthcare system right now. And it's great to see that there's a lot of funding going specifically towards that. It's clear that that's been made a priority and it's been recognized as the big scarcity. But the question still remains, you can put all this funding there, but where are those healthcare workers going to come from? And so that's the big question in my mind still. Yeah,
and we've heard, you've said it on this show before, as have others, you can open more ICU beds, or you can open more ER availability. You could even prepare or stock more surgical suites, but if you don't have the surgeons to attend, then what are you going to do about it? The government says that it'll be introducing more paramedics, more ambulances, which I know will, of course, at least put a Band-Aid on an issue in a lot of communities that have had unbelievable emergency response wait times. The government says it'll do its best to get through more surgeries, what it describes as inappropriately long wait times, which is candor from a government. More home care workers, expanding primary care. Were these some of the things you were looking to see? I mean, even with regards to ambulances and paramedics, maybe you could describe for the average person that doesn't understand what happens when an ambulance brings a patient into an ER. They don't drop them off and leave.
No, they don't. So that's a great thing to focus on, right? So patient calls 911. They get assessed, and it's decided kind of like how urgent this call is from an ambulance perspective. That they get put in the queue, of course, if it's very, very urgent, like if somebody's having a heart attack or if someone's unconscious, they're going to be top priority. Ambulance gets to them, assesses them, provides care. The paramedics provide care, and then en route to the hospital provide ongoing care, and then come to the ER, and then they get triaged like every other patient. The EMS triages always take priority. And then they still get put in the queue, right? Because there are still walk-ins that come in off the street. There are still other ambulances that are coming in with perhaps sicker patients. And depending on how sick the patient is, those paramedics do have to continue to be at the bedside or at the stretcher side of that patient. And it means that it's keeping them off of the road to respond to other calls. So absolutely, like getting more EMS vehicles and getting more paramedics is a huge priority. But again, my question remains, like, where are those paramedics going to come from? I'm glad that the funding is there and that, again, that it's recognized. But my concern is always, all of Canada has a healthcare worker shortage right now. So Alberta is not different or special. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how this funding specifically addresses where those human resources are going to come from.
Talking to Dr. Shazma Mithani, if you're just tuning in, live streaming audio on the Mixlr audio app presented by California Closets. Karen with an interesting comment in our YouTube live chat. She says that, they're giving themselves a big pat on the back that the healthcare system is no longer in crisis. I guess it depends on who you talk to. Karen says, but that's not what frontline workers are saying. You and I briefly touched on this before we turned the cameras on. Are you willing to take that on? Because I know that some people are in positions of leadership are making the assertion that we're out of the crisis zone when it comes to the state of healthcare right now.
I mean, I can only tell you what I see working this past weekend. I worked 3 evenings in a row. The wait times feel no different to me. I was working Friday evening, Saturday evening, and Sunday evening, and all 3 of those nights, it was very busy. And it was, whenever I looked at the screen in terms of how many people are in the waiting room, it was always between 20 and 30 or more. So like that
30 people?
Yes, 30 people that are still waiting to get into the emergency department to see the nurse and then to see one of the doctors. And so to me, that hasn't changed at all in the last 3 or 4 months or even longer. So,
how many ER docs would you have on a shift, on a weekend shift? Now let's remind people that the Royal Alexandra in downtown Edmonton is one of the busiest hospitals in the province, for sure.
It's the busiest hospital in Western Canada.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many ER docs would you have on like a Saturday night shift?
Four ER
and
docs,
you've got 30 people waiting to see the doctor at any given time. So each doc's got approximately 8-ish. I mean, obviously it works in triage fashion, but if somebody comes in with a gunshot wound and their life is threatened, they'll be seen right away.
Absolutely.
If somebody comes in with a sprained wrist, they might be there for
hours. 5, 6, 7 hours even. I mean, so I worked 2 shifts on kind of the more acute side, and then on Sunday I was on the less acute side, or the ambulatory side, we call it. And so that's where we would see things like sprained ankles or people who aren't urgently unwell. By the time I was seeing them in a bed, it was often 5 or 6 hours before I saw them. And then the other thing, I know, Ryan, you mentioned like each doctor gets about 8 people. That's just the waiting room. You have to remember that the people that are actually in the department already, like we're managing those, juggling all of those, getting blood work, getting investigations, talking to them, reassessing them, talking to consultants. So we're juggling all these patients that are in the department. And then it's always weighing on our mind, like what's in the waiting room and are we missing anything? Is there someone that's out there that's sick, that's getting sicker, that we aren't able to see in a timely fashion? So that's constantly weighing on us as well.
How do wait times, other than seeing ER docs, like when it comes to, like, for example, surgical wait times, things like that, how do you see it, or do you see it in the ER? One of the things that you did a really great job of explaining to us over the past couple of years is how there's been spillover impacts in the healthcare system and in particular facilities as well, like the hospital that you work out of. Where do you see that, or do you see that making an impact?
Absolutely. So I see that in 2 ways. One is people who don't have primary care providers. And then 2 are people who are on wait lists who are waiting for what we call elective surgeries, right? So things like not so much cataracts, but things like hernia repairs, gallbladder surgeries, hip or knee replacements. So these are all kind of people that are on the elective waiting list that are waiting to get surgeries. And so while they're waiting, and I agree, like the government said it very clearly yesterday, the wait times are inappropriately long. I don't think there's any arguing that at all. And so those people that are waiting for their gallbladder surgeries, they're coming in with gallbladder attacks. Those people that are waiting for their knee or hip replacements are coming in with chronic and ongoing pain. And then on the other side of that, people that don't have family doctors, family doctors are in my opinion, the bravest and most burdened people in the healthcare system. They have to kind of manage everything from a preventative standpoint. They're the foundation of the healthcare system. And so they do a lot. If you're a healthy person, you don't really get to have that perspective of how critical a family doctor is in people's healthcare. And so if it's someone who has chronic health conditions and they can't see their family doctor, they don't have a family doctor to see, the ER is always the safety net and will always see people. And so we often see that kind of cohort of patients coming in as well who don't have that family doctor that they can rely on.
I think everybody knows how I feel about family doctors. I was raised by one. My dad was very proud of his career as a family doc, and they bring something very unique to the table, right? The Jacks and Jills of all trades. And they do absolutely everything. And a lot of times in especially smaller communities or more remote communities, the family doc is the healthcare hub where it all happens. You're not that far removed from med school, like you're not nearing retirement. I can say this with confidence. I mean, you were just named to Edify's list of Edmonton's top 40 under 40. So say no more. You're closer to med school than you are to retirement, right? When you look around and you see your colleagues and you see trends and you see what med students are deciding to do right now, are you concerned that, say 10 years from now, the entire model will be so different that most people might forget what it was like to have a family doctor? What are you seeing happen all around you trend-wise?
I'm seeing a high rate of burnout in the existing family doctors that we have for many reasons. Because we have an overall shortage of family doctors, so every individual family doctor is taking on more and taking on more patients. A general lack of appreciation by policymakers of primary care and the medical home. And then medical students see that, right? And so you can't blame a student for not wanting to choose family medicine as a career because of all of the strife that's apparent in the system, in the primary care system right now. And so if that's not made a priority, again, I said it was the foundation of the healthcare system, and that's not an exaggeration. It literally is. And if that's not made a priority, it falls apart pretty quickly, and we've seen that in the last 3 or 4 years.
You write about this in the Toronto Star. People can check it out at thestar.com. Reads the headline. This is from last month. Doctors face significant rates of burnout if our system is not fixed soon. I'm not asking you to obviously betray the confidence of any of your colleagues, not asking you to reveal anything that would be inappropriate, but when it comes to what you're observing, what you cannot ignore around you, ultimate worst case scenario, are you seeing or fearing that you may see people leave the profession, that you may see people in mental health crisis of their own. You may see ultimately a scenario where maybe even the general public underestimated the magnitude of what was happening in the system all around us?
Absolutely. I think we as healthcare providers are also underestimating the magnitude of what we've gone through in the last 3 years. There has been a massive amount of moral injury among healthcare workers, where we face this terrible time, this pandemic, where we were under-resourced, where it was something that we had never experienced before, where we were seeing people, young people around us, getting very sick and dying. And then the subsequent stress on the healthcare system that still remains, where we're still under-resourced and still trying to catch up from that. All we want to do as healthcare workers is to be able to treat the people in front of us in the best way that we can. And I think it's really hard to understand from someone who isn't a healthcare worker or healthcare worker adjacent. You grew up with your dad as a family doctor, to understand how much of a struggle it is when we can't provide the care that we want. And I don't know how to explain it in any different way. Like, we all kind of decided to do medicine because we wanted to make impacts on patients and to care for them and to be there for them. And when the system doesn't let us do that, it's very distressing. When we see bad outcomes because of the system, people dying because the system has failed them, we carry that for the rest of our lives. So it's sometimes hard to even stop and recognize that, because, you know, especially as an ER doctor, we just, like, I put my head down and I just go, right? When I'm on shift, I just try to do whatever I can and be as efficient as I can and treat the patients that I can when we have a waiting room of 30 people and wait times of 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
But you don't really get a chance to breathe and think about, like, what did I just experience during that shift or during this past 3 years? And the reason I wrote that article was because I was taking, like, I like to write to kind of just get things out. And it was just a moment for me to just take that time to, like, think about that and actually be in it and understand how much this breaks us over time.
You write about an incident in your first year of residency. I probably wouldn't ask you about it if you hadn't have written about it and made it public, but you talked about witnessing your first true trauma, as you describe it. You say not a physical injury kind, but the kind of devastating patient death that sticks with you for life. You write that the agonizing sobs of the patient's mother still echo in your brain today. You describe it as a situation, you've seen dozens more, you say, that left you feeling helpless and hollow. There was a lot of talk about morale of healthcare workers, and it wasn't some sort of a hypothetical. It wasn't like sports pundits, nothing against sports pundits, but they try to get their finger on, like, how's the vibe in the dressing room? How's the team feeling? And it's all speculative. But through a large part of COVID, there were healthcare workers that were being spat on walking into hospitals. There were healthcare workers being harassed and threatened. To a certain degree, there still is some of that, but it appears to have cooled. When it comes to the mental health, to what we might describe as the morale of your colleagues, do you see there being healing or recovery as society slowly emerges out of COVID-19? Or, I mean, obviously, I think probably some permanent damage done, but what do you see? Maybe what do you feel personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that it's slowly starting to happen, but I think, kind of as I was just saying, that right now is also when people are only finally starting to recognize the trauma that and the moral injury that we faced as a profession. And so the first step is recognition. And I think people are starting to understand that and starting to, you know, finally things have settled just enough to be able to have that recognition. And then the next step is trying to heal after that, right? And so I think it's slowly getting there, but it's not where it needs to be.
I want to encourage people to check out your Instagram, your Twitter and your Instagram a little bit different. You do a good job of, like, using platforms differently. Any social media expert will tell you that they have their strengths and weaknesses, each one. So people can check out your everyday ER features. And again, as mentioned, I mean, I think you've done a really good job bringing people up to speed on what they need to understand about things like top 5 fever facts. facts or top 3 cough facts. You talk about supplements for cold symptoms and hand, foot, mouth disease and all kinds of things that people might know a little bit about. They might be hearing that it's an issue as they see more absences in their kids' schools, or they see more workplace absences, but don't know exactly what's going on. We've had some friends and colleagues absolutely floored by whatever virus is making its way around right now. Can you shine some light on that? I know people would be interested to hear. You must be seeing an uptick in ER visits as well.
Yeah, so my Instagram videos that I make are directly influenced by what I'm seeing in Emerge, right? That's how I started this whole thing. Like whatever I'm seeing, I want to get that education out there. So man, this has been a rough viral season. I have 2 young kids, as you know, right? It's been rough. And there have been multiple like respiratory viruses and GI viruses, gastrointestinal viruses just floating around. So there's a big bout of stomach bugs going around right now. So lots of kids coming in with vomiting and diarrhea. Still a ton of respiratory viruses, and there are little pockets of hand, foot, and mouth as well. So we're just seeing everything right now. And the problem with that is when there are so many viruses circulating, it's not uncommon for families and kids to just get back-to-back viruses and not really have any reprieve, which is challenging.
Have you talked to people like at a ground level of whether or not they're getting flu shots, things like that? Is there like vaccination exhaustion where people are ignoring the regular flu shot routine? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I am. And it's something that I definitely address with every single family that I see that comes in with a kid with a respiratory illness. I ask them if they've had their flu shot. I ask them if they've had their COVID shots. And I ask them if the whole family has done that. And in particular, when we were seeing really, really bad influenza in kids in December and January, I was really pushing that and spending that extra time to do that education at the bedside to make sure that families understood the importance of getting it and how sick kids were getting because of it.
MA says that healthcare sounds like it's like working in a war zone. There's so much moral distress because you can't give the care that you were trained to provide. It's an interesting phrase, moral distress. Yeah. You've got a busy day ahead of you, and we can't be keeping you out of the ER here. Is there anything that we haven't touched on? We're about to get into the nitty-gritty of the budget. We're going to talk about mandatory balanced budgets and education funding and buying votes and all the stuff that our pundits are going to get into. But through a healthcare lens, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I just want to make sure that Albertans and the listeners understand. I'm always going to put this plug in, the importance of a public, not-for-profit healthcare system. You know my lens and my angle on that, Ryan. I see the most vulnerable people, probably arguably in Alberta, really. And any level of having to think about profits for corporations in healthcare is just inappropriate, in my opinion. It kind of takes the priority away from the patients and puts the priority on money. And that is really just not the direction we should be heading. We have lots of space and capacity in the public healthcare system, and that's where the funding and that's where the resources should be focused on.
Is it so for you? It's a hard no on exploring potential other avenues of delivery or potential third ways, as Ralph Klein used to call it, of trying to solve the problem by attracting and retaining talent, by cutting down on surgical wait times. It looks to me, your eyes, for people listening on the podcast, your eyes are just saying to me, You know way more about it than me. Obviously, I'm just somebody that takes a look around and formulates opinions, but I want them to be informed opinions. What is it with you that makes it a hard no?
There is lots of evidence from around the world that shows why it should be a hard no. As soon as we start having 2 parallel systems, the first thing that suffers is patient care, and it actually is more expensive. I know that the allure of having, outsourcing surgeries or outsourcing care to for-profit corporations seems like an easy Band-Aid solution because it's like, hey, we're offloading the public system, right? That's often the argument that's made, that we're offloading things from the public system. The problem is, first and foremost, healthcare worker resources are finite, right? And so if you have a limited pool of healthcare workers and you're trying to expand the system into a separate for-profit system, they're going to get pulled away from the public system, and the public system is going to suffer from that. And then we know in terms of evidence from even places like Australia, the United States, the UK, that as soon as you have a second parallel system that's for-profit, it ends up being more expensive and increases the amount of cost that needs to not only go into the not-for-profit system, the public system, but also into the for-profit system. So in the end, it is not more cost efficient. It leads to poorer patient outcomes, and it leads to more health inequity.
That's Dr. Shazma Mithani. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Shazma Mithani, at Dr. Shazma Mithani, respectively. And of course, show her some love with the amazing public messaging that you've done. Did you see that coming ahead of COVID? I mean, did you feel that you might become almost I don't know if you want to be described as a face of the system or kind of a spokesperson, a representative of the ER, somebody that's, you talk about the relationship people have with their family docs. You're not necessarily one per se, but you almost take your job as though you are one. Did you always want to have that type of a platform?
No, not even a little bit. It was so accidental. I kind of got thrown into it at a time where there were concerns when our contract got terminated. A few years ago, there were some concerns that a group of ER doctors had, and I somehow got pushed forward as like, Shaz, you can be the spokesperson for this. It's like, guys, I haven't done any media or anything before. And so started doing that, and then a month later, the pandemic happened, and so I decided to kind of be there and try to cut through the noise of misinformation. And no, if you had asked me like 3 or 4 years ago if this is where I thought I would be, would never have guessed it.
Well, we're grateful that you're here, and it means a lot to have you sort of giving us, as you do, a frank assessment, a solid diagnosis of where healthcare is at, especially a day after a budget. Thanks for making time for us today. Couldn't respect you more.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. Make sure you take that mug with you, hey?
Thanks,
Doctor was grinding my gears. She's been on the show how many times? You don't have a mug yet, so you make sure you
now
take
I
that
have
mug.
one.
There you have one. That's Dr. Shazma Mithani. This conversation was presented by our friends at Friesen Brothers. Wanted to let you know, of course, it's the first of the month, which means that it is 15% off at Friesen Brothers today. 16 different Alberta locations. Purchases $75 or more qualify. This is a great chance to, of course, do what you can to keep more bucks in your pocket, to stretch those dollars. Friesen Brothers, for more than 65 years, has been proudly family-owned, Alberta-owned, Alberta-grown. That's Friesen Brothers. You can check out their flyer online today at friesen.com. Another way to keep some money in your pocket, hey, when it comes to utilities, you know that costs have been up year over year. You know that you're probably paying more for electricity and natural gas, maybe even internet, than you were a couple of years ago, unless maybe you're doing business with Park Power. The families, Real Talk subscribers tell us every single week that they're saving more than they thought they would after bringing their business to Park Power. It takes literally 2 minutes to compare rates online at parkpower.ca. And don't forget, bundle their services using the promo code RealTalk23. That's RealTalk23. And they'll take $50 off your first bill for each service you go with. If you go electricity, natural gas, and internet, that's $150 off your first bill from Park Power. It's always awesome for us to see somebody visit our Real Talk studio for the first time, like Dr. Mithani just did. She walks in, she goes, wow. And we go, yeah, this whole thing was built by Complete Care Restoration. We're so proud to do business with them, so proud to partner with them. It gives us an opportunity to look you right in the eye and say with confidence, if you ever find yourself in a nightmare scenario, fire damage, flood damage, maybe you've opened up a wall and they found mold. You got to deal with asbestos as part of your renovation. Trust Complete Care Restoration at 780-454-0776. And you tell your insurance company, you know, you can pick who they hire to do that work. We recommend you pick Complete Care Restoration. A big shout as well to our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. For a limited time, they're featuring the chicken strips and fry rings basket. Nobody does chicken strips like DQ. And this 4-piece crispy strips and fry rings basket includes crispy fries, crispy onion rings, and delicious ranch dipping sauce. You can rejoice because you no longer have to choose between your favorite DQ menu items. Satisfy all your cravings at the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. All right, we're going to get to Alberta's best budget breakdown in just a second, featuring Kristin Raworth, Michael Solberg, Rick Bell. Before we do, Johnny, can you tee up the video from the Alberta legislature just yesterday? Because I want to give our panelists something to really sink their teeth into right out of the gates. And I'm not trying to make people angry. I'm not trying to rile people up or fan the flames. I'm just saying this happened, and perhaps we should talk about it. Everybody knows Drew Barnes, if you pay attention to Alberta politics. A bit of a maverick, but not with the capital M, not affiliated officially with that party. Drew is, of course, fought for the freedom of folks that didn't want to conform to things like vaccine mandates or mask mandates. And yesterday, a curious situation as he proudly introduced to the Alberta legislature she who spent time behind bars for her role in coordinating and quarterbacking the Freedom Convoy that held Ottawa hostage for weeks after weeks. Here's Drew Barnes introducing Tamara Leach to the Alberta legislature yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, through you, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome one of my constituents. She is a grandma, a musician, and a true leader within the freedom movement. She gave hope to all of Alberta, Canada, and the world. She was proud to stand strong and free in face of the worst government overreach in a generation. Tamara Leach. Tens of thousands of Canadians supported and helped Tamara. This includes a constitutional lawyer from Alberta who held the Prime Minister account during the Emergency Act inquiry. Please welcome Eva Chipiuk and Tamara Leach. Ladies, please stand and accept the honorable member.
All right, so people blew a gasket. Of course, other people loved it. I want to find out what our panelists think about it. Kristin Raworth is a political staffer. She is a newly minted co-host of the Bad and Bitchy podcast. She's the interim chair of Parody Egg. It's awesome to have you here in studio. And you got it. And joining us from Calgary, we have political strategist, former Conservative staffer Michael Solberg, a partner at New West Public Affairs, and well-read and bombastic Calgary Sun columnist Rick Bell. It's awesome to have the three of you here. Kristin, I couldn't help but notice we're sitting right across the table from each other as you see Drew Barnes introducing Tamara Leach. You look like you're going to give yourself a migraine with your eyes rolling back. What's your thought on it?
Well, first, before I start, I just want to congratulate Michael on his baby.
Thanks so much, buddy. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, buddy.
I appreciate it.
As for this, Drew Barnes is going to Drew Barnes. I don't think that there should be any surprise that he did this. He's been very vocally supportive of her. She is his constituent. What I found was interesting is that the pushback was very much also against the UCP government, even though he's not a sitting UCP MLA. He says he's not running for the nomination. So I guess, I don't agree with his concept of freedom and his support for her or the convoy, but I think it needs to sit with him and him alone, and people trying to make this about the UCP is not fair.
Okay, Rick, what do you think of Kristin's assessment?
Exactly correct. It's a nothing burger. Drew Barnes, an independent guy who once was in the UCP, introduces Tamara. Is this going to be about I'm going to let you in on something. Until May 29th, I am seeing everything through the lens of the election. Is this going to be an issue at the doorstep at the election? How many doorsteps are people going to say, I'm not voting or I am voting on a certain party based on this? Zip. None. So I think it's some sort of Twitter, social media obsession, something. I don't think it has anything to do with anything beyond Drew Barnes being Drew Barnes, as has already been mentioned.
I'm seeing more and more people, and Rick, I'm not calling this your recent awakening, but I'm saying society appears to have a recent awakening. Michael, is it true that we're starting to differentiate between Twitter and real life? We're starting to identify things that are Twitter problems and then things that are real problems? You're a strategist. Do you have this tool in your toolbox?
I like to think that I do, and I certainly hope that you're correct, Ryan. Many of us, including the folks probably on this call, live under the dome. We consume information in different ways, and we certainly think other issues are more important than I think the general public. And I think the sentiments from my friends Rick and Kristin are absolutely correct. This will live and die on Twitter. I don't think regular people certainly haven't heard that Drew Barnes did this in the legislature, and nor do I think they'll care if they find out. He's an independent MLA, perhaps not even seeking re-election at all. This is a nothing burger, but fun to gab about on Twitter, but I think it dies there.
Okay, let's get into this budget. There's growing urban school boards that have spent a lot of time, at least the last 3 years, trying to educate more students dealing with inflation driving up their costs. They may have some breathing room over the next year. We're going to see more funding for school transportation. We're going to see more money for construction. We're going to see more money for post-secondary institutions, which appeared to be, at least at odds, maybe even at war with the previous Conservative government under Jason Kenney. It's described as a good news budget. It's always a nice position as a government to be in a position to splash cash around. But Dinger, Rick, I hope you don't mind me. I'm not throwing you under the bus here. I just thought it was hilarious when we wanted Alberta's best budget breakdown and I needed somebody to throw hand grenades. I reached out to you and you basically told me, nobody cares about budget stories. To quote you, you said budget coverage is overrated. I'm glad you even showed up this morning.
Okay, I'll prove it to you. I wish I could show you the software. We have software which shows readership in real time of all the stories. And the budget is not blowing the roof off news coverage today. I also said budget stories are big stories when there is something that hits most people directly.
True.
Budgets when taxes went up, or they brought in healthcare premiums, or they got rid of healthcare premiums, or they made deep cuts. We remember the first 3 budgets of Ralph Klein. We remember the budget where Ed Stelmach raised the price on booze, only to have to retract it a few months later because there was such outrage, and that was the front page story. But when you have a budget, this isn't partisan, this is readership. When you have a budget where there's a surplus, where they're spending tons of money without borrowing money, where there isn't a tax increase, it's, I think, harder for people to be engaged unless they have a particular file. If they have a particular file that has been done wrong in the budget, they will definitely bring that to the public's attention. But in terms of, even the NDP put out a statement talking about, well, this isn't the real thing. The real thing is the stuff after May 29th. So, especially in the case of a pre-election budget, it's really hard. There are a few people, if they're real conservatives, who might say this budget isn't conservative enough because there's a lot of spending, and even the guardrails allow for several percentage point spending perhaps in a given year. But guess what? Conservative is a brand in Alberta. It's not a political philosophy. Most Albertans are not really conservatives. They are conservative by brand. Sometimes that has meant austerity. Sometimes that has meant drunken sailor spending. And in most of those cases, the people that are brand conservatives stick with the conservatives. So they won't be going, well, why is it such a great achievement that we're spending per capita the same amount as the NDP and BC? Different brand. So, I mean, it's very interesting when people sometimes look at these things ideologically, because I'm from Manitoba. I never think this is conservative. I'm a poor guy here. People in Alberta piss more money away personally and in government than anywhere else. You know why? Just like in this budget, because they have money. You probably don't see this very clearly here. You see the Ukrainian flag, but this is a $20 Value Village jacket I'm wearing. that is truth to power. That is unheard of here. I don't have a condo in Fernie. I don't go to Palm Springs on holidays. I'm going to Winnipeg in the summer.
What are you even doing?
Hometown. I mean, so in people's personal lives, they spend like drunken sailors. Governments have spent. This isn't a budget of spending like drunken sailors, but it's spending on a lot of drinks.
Okay.
And so there might be a few sort of theoretical or idealist conservatives who might not like it. And there's obviously going to be people who say, There's a lot that will come after May 29th that we should be talking about, pensions and well cleanups, etc. But there's no tax hikes. There's a surplus. Lots of people are getting money. Rock and roll.
Okay, we'll get into this in a second because I do think these new fiscal rules that have been introduced that require balanced budgets and introducing surplus spending guardrails may qualify as conservative policy. I'm not saying it does or doesn't. I'll let the three of you hash it out. Kristin, you're sitting here in studio and I'm studying your body language, and it seems like some of the stuff Rick's saying is resonating with you, but it felt like when he said, am I reading too much into this? When he said, unless something personally resonates with you, and I just felt like that hit you. What was it? Oh, hang on. Just hit your mute button there. There we go. You got it.
Sorry. So in the budget, there is no additional funding supports for sexual assault centers or for women's shelters. As you know, because Mary Jane James from the Sexual Assault Center was here a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, she was.
They have been requesting additional operational funding to support the massive wait lists that are existing for across the province, but especially in Edmonton and Calgary. They had asked the minister for support and were told that they could get one-time payment of 3.9, I believe it was.
Million, yeah.
Yeah, and one-time funding does absolutely nothing because all you're doing is creating more need and then taking the money away. So instead of getting 3.9, they got nothing. So there was no support for them. And what resonated to me about what Rick was saying is that one of the things that's really hard as an advocate on this issue and someone who talks about this issue all the time is it's not a door-knocking issue. It's not something that's going to motivate people a lot of the time to vote one way or another based on how these issues are supported. So it makes it more frustrating to try to get that message across. And one other thing I just want to highlight is that within the budget, there's almost $5 million being put towards 211. When you call 211 for mental health supports, who do they refer you to? They refer you to sexual assault centers if you have an issue around sexual violence. The same sexual assault centers that are not getting additional funding to support those people. So it just hasn't, there's not a lot of long-term thinking in terms of the impact. And just going to what Rick said too around conservative ideology, a lot of conservatives talk about return on investment and how we need to make sure that if we are putting money out there, that we are saving money in other places. And providing additional funding to the sexual assault centers across this province is a huge cost savings in health, in justice, in addictions, in all sorts of other areas. So yes, it's $15 million, which is what they've requested, but the amount of money that you would be saving from survivors not entering into other parts of the system is massive.
Interesting what Kristin says there, Michael. It's not a door-knocking issue. It's obviously a pre-election budget. That's very obvious, and so you see expenditures in areas where obviously people will have questions at the door. But public safety, the budgets of the ministries of justice, public safety emergency service rising by 12% next year. There's more funding to pay more crown prosecutors, more judges, more sheriffs, fight organized crime, funding to expand First Nations-run police services, and $3 million, by the way. This is a story, I don't think it's flying under the radar, but $3 million for municipalities that want to explore establishing their own police service. Like Grand Prairie is an example. I was talking to Mayor Clayton just the other day about that. Michael, what else do you see with regards to this being a pre-election budget that really resonated with you? Something that sent a very clear message about what this government is going to campaign on.
Yeah, sure. And that's, I think that's a large and broad question, just given the size of this budget. They're outspending the NDP's own projections when they were in government. Of course, as we all know, the NDP have less issue with loosening the purse strings as an ideology with respect to the budget than the UCP. So that was surprising, but perhaps not, I guess. It is a pre-election budget after all. I think my biggest takeaways is the efforts by the UCP to undermine, I think, the narrative that the New Democrats are building, that they're stronger on healthcare, that they're stronger on post-secondary. We saw significant spending in healthcare. They've doubled, frankly, the size of the budget for rural health redevelopment. We saw in a pre-budget announcement significant support for students in post-secondary. And I think that's an effort to take some of the bite out of what the NDP are trying to charge forward with respect to the ballot box question. They want to be the leaders on healthcare, and they want the ballot box question to be framed around that. The UCP are, of course, pushing the economy, affordability, the just transition conversation. But they did a significant effort in this budget to undermine, I think, some of their weaknesses, which is on healthcare. And we saw that in the numbers. Proof is in the pudding.
Michael, what do you think is going to be the ballot box question? Like if 2019 was framed as a referendum on the carbon tax, what's this election going to be?
I think it'll be on affordability, the cost of living, inflation, and of course the economy. It's the economy, stupid, as the old adage goes. So if they are successful in winning the air war and framing the ballot box question around the economy, they're going to win. Governments win elections when the economy is doing well, and this economy is doing well. They've rebounded in a significant way. It's the largest swing in the province's finances in the history, not of just the province, but the country. We're looking at massive deficits during the pandemic, which have been completely unwound and buoyed by strong commodity prices, which, of course, Alberta is often on the roller coaster with. So I think it's going to be on the economy, and the UCP have a very strong narrative in that. Jobs have recovered. The economy is doing well. The budget situation is exceptional. And it'll be tough to punish a government when things are rosy. But the NDP, for their part, will have to make a case to ruin the confidence in government through past gaffes, through the COVID travel scandals, their weakness on healthcare. But they certainly have an uphill battle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it just the voters' memory is short. The news cycle's memory is short, right, Rick? I mean, like
Sure.
if you're trying to go back and say, it was our most downloaded show in this show's history. It was January 4th of 2021. That was the Aloha Gate scandal. Rick, if you're trying to go back as an opposition politician and say, remember what this government did 2 years and 3 months ago under a different leader, is the average voter going to buy that attack? I mean, how much work does the NDP have to do here to convince people that they're going to be the better fiscal managers of Alberta over the next 4 years?
Well, and I think you should invite us all back in a few weeks.
You're already invited back, yeah.
To discuss this very topic, to have a whole show just on what is the NDP going to do to win government now, with all of the stuff that Michael was mentioning. Yes, they can bring up stuff from the past. I remember the election when Kenny won, and they were bringing up his youth in San Francisco, and they had a documentary about how bad a guy he was. It just didn't get any traction. Talking about those readership numbers again. The last time it was jobs, the economy, pipelines, Trudeau, carbon tax. Those were the stories, hammering away at those. You want to go back in the history books a little bit? Let's go back in the history books to the election Jim Prentice lost, the 2015 election. What had happened there? We had the Wild Rose defections. We had the collapse of the Wild Rose. We had the Wild Rose trying to build themselves back up. We had the PCs calling an early election nobody wanted. We had tax hikes, the budget nobody liked. And we had two conservative parties running, or at least conservative in brand, in self-identification. And that's when the NDP won under Rachel Notley, under those conditions. Let's now fast forward to today's conditions. One branded conservative party, the economy better, a budget that isn't like the last PC budget. And where do they go from here? And I think they are going to go on what is not in the budget, as well as the stuff that Michael's brought up. They're going to bring up what about the stuff after the budget? What about the pension plan? What about the oil well cleanup? What hidden agenda? There we go. Have we ever heard that word in Canadian politics before? The hidden agenda. They will have to go after the hidden agenda, and I think they will still have to go after Danielle Smith. Because when I talk to people down here in Calgary, it echoes what's in the polls, which is the UCP brand is stronger than the Danielle Smith brand. And everybody knows that. So maybe they go that way as well. But I think right now, the question is, okay, the UCP has upped the ante with this budget in this political poker game. where does the NDP go?
But the UCP,
and I'm curious where they do go.
The UCP brand was bigger than the Jason Kenney brand too, right? Jason Kenney didn't poll favorably on the likability meter as much,
right? And they still won by 22 points,
right? Like Michael, you're nodding. I mean, that wasn't an issue before. Would it be an issue now?
No, I don't think so. To Rick's point, to your point as well, Ryan. The UCP were far more popular than Jason Kenney in 2019, right. But they voted for the brand, and they're going to do it again.
I know. I say that's all they've got to try, Michael. I'm saying things they got to pull something out.
Well, this is reminding me like when the Toronto Raptors were facing the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. They ended up winning thanks to the fact that half of Golden State was injured. But people were like, it was like game 2, and people were like, I guess they could try this. It just sounded like a bunch of Hail Mary. Is that really how everybody's approaching this? Is what everybody sort of assesses the NDP's chances to be looking like right now?
Well, they need to be far more deliberate than they're being now. I think they're tired. I don't think they have a great narrative right now. They're very reactive, and they've been really slow on some of the key issues. They were slow to the gates on just transition. They're getting the rug pulled out from underneath them on healthcare. Rachel Notley is a known entity. She's the same leader. They're presenting the same brand, presenting some of the same messaging that they did in 2019. And I think if they're going to be successful, they need to retool everything. They need to have a forward-looking vision and really think about what exactly are they presenting here in terms of policy and in terms of a vision and an innovative one, a new one that wasn't rejected 4 years ago. And I'm not sure that they're on that path right now. And frankly, this was theirs to lose. They had so much momentum. If you look at the polls 6 months ago, they had 15, 20-point leads. And that has been eroded. Over recent weeks and months. So if I'm the NDP, I'm certainly hitting the panic button, and I'm certainly thinking about how can we correct course here. And it's still very close. Frankly, I think it's a 50-50 toss-up at this point who's going to pull this off.
Really?
I think momentum is certainly I think momentum is with the UCP. There is a path to victory for the New Democrats, but the window of opportunity is closing, and it's getting a narrow and more narrow path to victory with every day.
Kristin, to state the obvious, it's way easier to capture people's attention when you're telling them how you're going to spend $68 billion. It's way easier to get attention when you're the government. But it's a big opportunity for the opposition to respond on budget day. What's your assessment of how Notley and her team did yesterday?
Well, their response was kind of odd because their big talking point was that it was going to be the most expensive summer ever. And coming out from the NDP, that's just a strange talking point. That sounds like something you would hear a conservative say. And it's based off of the assumption that as soon as Danielle Smith wins the election, all of the supports that they've been providing around affordability and things like that will end. And that's not based on reality. And I think that one of the bigger issues that the NDP have, speaking to what Michael and Rick both highlighted, is people voted for Notley in 2015 because she was positive, she was optimistic, and she was providing solid policy. I hear from people in all aspects of my life who want to vote for the NDP. They don't support a lot of the UCP's vision. They certainly don't support some of the things the Premier has done and said, but they don't feel like they've been given a reason. And I've seen very little policy out of the NDP. I've seen, they did make an announcement around healthcare a couple weeks ago. But other than that, if they go right back to the well of Danielle Smith is evil and we aren't, that's not going to work. It didn't, like Rick said, it didn't work in 2019 when they had their Jason Kenney website, and it's not going to work this time. And I think that they need to be more focused on what made them electable in 2015, and that was that positive, optimistic, policy-based approach, and not what they've been doing now.
I want to ask you to circle it back, Kristin, on this announcement made by the Finance Minister, Travis Taves, yesterday. I'll get all three of you but Kristin, you take it first. New fiscal rules will require balanced budgets. Be honest, it's a publicity stunt because it could change at any time in a future government, although it does create a bit of a quagmire for a future government if it is the NDP to change a rule around requiring balanced budgets. The optics might be difficult to navigate, but seasoned politicians can do it. Basically, says Minister Taves, the province required to present balanced budgets, limit year-over-year operating expense growth. If there is surplus cash under these new rules, at least half goes toward paying debt. The remaining money could go to the new Alberta Fund, which could allow further debt repayment, a deposit into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, which is obviously a talking point, or any one-time discretionary initiatives, which sounds to me like checks for everybody. Is this the type of thing that the average person cares about? What are your thoughts on this?
So my thoughts are twofold. The part that no one's going to care about, but that I care about substantially, and I think will affect organizations within the province, is the fact that this part of what they're saying is they will not do operational funding increases for organizations. So again, unless they are tied to inflation or population growth. So that also will deeply impact organizations like the sexual assault centers, like women's shelters, like LGBTQ2S serving organizations, ones that are not. So it'll help people who are on AISH potentially, but it will not help these other organizations that have been funded operationally through the government. So that is an issue, but that's very in the weeds that not a lot of people are going to get super worked up about. The Heritage Fund is huge. And even going back to Taves, his comment, he didn't use the actual quote in the legislature, but, God give me another boom and I promise not to piss it away this time.
Yeah.
That resonates for a lot of folks. And so putting money back into the Heritage Fund, that's a 5-minute elevator conversation that you can have with a voter and they understand what that means. And that's a positive thing. And I think it's going to bring a lot of moderates or people who were like, I'm not sure how I feel about things. That will be one of the things that I think will impact their vote for sure.
Rick, with the Conservative as a brand, not an ideology, how do you reconcile this? It sounds kind of conservative.
A lot of Conservative governments got elected doing absolutely nothing about the Heritage Fund. Zippo. I mean, that's the situation it's in. I'm not so sure the people who are counting their pennies and waiting for the retirement Kelowna are really honestly that concerned about the Alberta Heritage Fund. They say they are. It's one of those apple pie kind of topics, but it obviously wasn't of concern to Albertans in many elections because nothing was done about the Heritage Fund compared to the savings that were done in jurisdictions because people wanted spending. What I found funny about the lockup yesterday is people who, in the media, who are always saying the Conservatives and they cut things and they destroy things and they hurt people so bad. We're all asking questions about why are you spending so much money? Why are you spending so much money on this? Why are you spending so much money on that? How come there's so much money going out the door? How come the balanced budget rule has exceptions? I mean, then you've won when you're a Conservative Party and the media pivots from your heartless monsters who are starving the poor to your profligate big spenders who are going to spend the province into the ditch. But that's sort of the surreal world we're now living in. And by the way, let me be very clear. I don't think attacks on Danielle Smith will necessarily work. But I sort of feel like watching the Calgary Flames and wondering what is it going to take for these folks to get into the playoffs? They just lost, as you probably know, with a few seconds left to the Boston Bruins, who were tired.
Yeah. So I was there.
Michael
was there. I'm a Bruins fan, Rick. I'm a Bruins fan. So
okay, so you didn't.
Yeah, there you go. But you know what I'm saying. So I really do think, especially, maybe we could talk about this in another show. There's also a tough electoral map. For the NDP. The NDP have to win some very solidly middle-class suburban seats. Not enough to win the working-class seats, not enough to win what you might call lower to middle-class seats. They actually have to win some of the seats that normally you would not expect them to in Calgary. So, again, I think the big story now is what did they do? The UCP have played their hand. They've showed their cards. They showed what they're going to do. They showed what they're going to talk about. They are going to have a platform where they are going to talk about extending a lot of this stuff. So they'll probably talk more about public safety, more about healthcare, more about affordability, and more about, obviously, nodding to Justin Trudeau. But so I think the big story is what do people do outside of going on Twitter and saying that we're all secretly in the employ of the UCP and we're being paid by Danielle Smith secretly to say what we're saying today, which is not true. But again, the momentum was so great with the NDP right up to Christmas. I interviewed her, Rachel Notley, at a coffee shop in Calgary, and people were coming up to her. It was like Paul McCartney in Liverpool. and seriously, and since then, even before the budget, they haven't really come out strong, and now the budget requires them to come out strong in a very big way. And it's not going to be enough to say how, my last little thought, all the years I covered Ralph Klein, right to the end, right to his final day, the quote-unquote left would say, how did Albertans ever vote for that guy? He never finished high school. He stuck his foot in his mouth. He was a drunk. They said that right to the end. They couldn't believe it. Now, I'm not saying Danielle Smith is Ralph Klein, because she is definitely not. But I hope for their sake they're not saying that on May 30. And they're saying, I can't believe Albertans voted for Danielle Smith. She's so crazy and so off the wall. Because I saw that happen with Klein, where people just couldn't believe that he was premier, because they were smarter than him.
Michael, you were in the room with me Monday and Tuesday at the Alberta Tourism Advocacy Summit. We had a chance to hear from Rachel Notley and Darren Billis with her. We heard from Premier Danielle Smith and her Parks Minister, Todd Lowen, Forestry, Parks and Tourism. It was an interesting back-to-back opportunity to hear two different visions for the province. I think that it's fair to characterize Notley's address as one that was focused on growing the tourism sector and growing the parks network responsibly, with sustainability as a top priority, ensuring that they're properly funded and accessible to all Albertans. Obviously, Danielle Smith I shouldn't say obviously, a lot of people weren't there, but she took a very business-forward approach. She talked about regulatory barriers. She talked about getting rid of red tape, addressing worker shortages, and really collaborating with industry on a number of fronts. In the context, as we wrap here, of the personality comparison that Rick's alluding to, who would you rather have as the CEO, so to speak? Who would you rather have as the face of the province? What specifically jumped out at you, for those that weren't in the room with us on Monday and Tuesday, in your vibe, or what you picked up from the two party leaders?
Sure. No, and that's a fair question, and frankly, a question that Albertans will be asked to answer in 2.5, 3 months from now. And of course, I'll declare my bias. My brother works for Premier Smith. I'm a Conservative staffer. Everybody knows where my views lie. So I'm certainly biased as I answer this. But both women, both leaders, are incredibly sharp. And both polished communicators, but I think Danielle Smith has the edge. I think she's a better communicator. I think she's a better debater. I find Rachel Notley to be over briefed sometimes, and gets too far into the weeds on some issues. Whereas Danielle Smith carries kind of a higher message that I think resonates more clearly with Martha and Henry, as Ralph Klein would call them. So I think Danielle Smith right now has an edge. And as I said before, I think Rachel Notley is tired. I think the brand is tired. And I think they're took way too long to figure out how to rebrand themselves. And what, of course, was going to be a competitive election, and still will be, but they're running out of steam. And I think all that Danielle Smith needs to do is look at Rachel Notley once during the debate and say, you oversaw the largest contractions in the economy in the province's history. And you have a lot of nerve standing on the stage and asking Albertans to re-vote for that again. And certainly that was not all Rachel Notley's fault. Obviously, she suffered from a collapse in the price of energy. But that is a condemning and compelling statistic. And I think if Albertans are voting on the economy, which I think they will, and if you compare the records of both of these governments, the proof is in the pudding. Its proof is in the numbers. And I think Danielle Smith is sharper than Rachel Notley in her ability to communicate that.
Kristin, on that comparison, last word to you.
Yeah, I'll just build off what Michael said. I mean, all Danielle Smith really has to do is highlight that Rachel Notley brought in the single biggest tax increase in Alberta history, and she brought it in through the carbon tax, and she didn't campaign on it. So anytime during the debates or over the next couple months when, she will call out Danielle Smith for a hidden agenda, because as she has already in response to the budget around the fact that there's nothing around pension plan in there, the Alberta Police really isn't covered except for 2 one-off funding things, and she said, oh, this is going to happen, she's just not telling you about it. Smith will respond with that. And I do think if this is an issue, if this election is about the economy, that Notley's really going to have to look at her messaging and how she's going to approach that in a way that is resonates with folks outside of just having, it needs to be a 5-minute elevator speech on why she's better for the economy, and I haven't heard her do that yet.
Okay, so, and I never want to lie to the three of your faces as I say we'll get you to wrap. So I won't introduce an entirely different thought stream because I know you've built your mornings around this hard out, this hard stop. But if I'm advising Rachel Notley on this, if I start getting hit with you didn't campaign on the largest tax increase, carbon tax in Alberta's history, I'm probably pointing to the fact that the Conservative government blew up that baked-in Alberta carbon tax and hitched our wagon to the Trudeau carbon tax. And I'm also probably pointing out that then if we're playing that way, this government better be campaigning on an Alberta pension fund and an Alberta police force, because if they bring that in after the fact without having campaigned on it, then all hell's going to break loose. Am I right or am I right?
You're right. You're right. And
okay.
Both of the things you mentioned are really unpopular with regular people. So
100%.
It'd be a big gamble.
Okay.
And there's a reason that they weren't included in the budget, and there's a reason you don't hear Danielle Smith talk about it anymore as much. They want to get elected, and they realize that those are not really. They go to the basest of the base of the party. They do not go to the vast majority of Albertans.
And remember what you said right off the top, which is news cycles and how quickly things can change.
Yeah.
In politics, there are always the great unknowns. It is not May 28th at the moment or May 27th. We still have a ways to go. There could be things that blow up. There could be landmines that are activated because, following talk about an oil roller coaster. What about the roller coaster in the belly of the beast known as the Alberta politics?
Oh, yeah.
Anything can happen. But right now, it's advantage Smith.
There you have it. That's Rick Bell. Read his work in the Calgary Sun. Michael Solberg also joining us from Calgary just hours after his Boston Bruins defeated the Calgary Flames. And Kristin Raworth, longtime contributor and panelist on Real Talk, but making her in-studio debut.
And I'm finally getting a mug after being on your show like 10 times.
You've earned it.
A mug.
Hey,
I'm coming in. I promise.
You guys get your asses up to Edmonton and you join us in studio, and you'll walk out of here with a studio mug as well. Great to see the three.
Broken glass up Highway 2 to get there. Trust me.
We won't make you do that, Rick. Great to see all three of you, and thank you for doing this. You can let us know what you thought of this conversation. What points did we miss? Where did our panelists absolutely nail it?
I love the Paul McCartney reference from Rick Bell there. That was great. I wonder what a election lead up playlist would be like with that. Oil fields forever. Maybe some I want to hold your health care. I want to hold your health care.
We have untapped talent right here. You're doing election playlists. Rachel, you shared a story at this tourism summit when we were there. And by the way, Raworth, if you want to just sit in here and hang out with us, that'd be sweet too. We're going to do MyJasper Memories. We're going to do some chat. And if you want to keep hanging out, it's awesome to have in-studio visitors, in-studio guests. But so Notley tells the story, and every politician's going to tell the stories that flatter them, obviously. But that said, and I asked her a direct question. I said, so when it comes to, because we had tourism, I mean, like literally, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 people working in tourism, and they're submitting their own questions, right? And one of them says, and they were speaking, I think, based on the body language in the room, they were speaking for a bunch of people, saying we're having a hell of a time finding and attracting talent and like people that can work in the tourism sector and help us out. And we're even talking in some of the more entry-level jobs. It's just really difficult right now. And they said one of these challenges has been the increase in minimum wage. And so I say to Ms. Notley, I said, so what do you say to people like at the doors, or what are you going to say to people on the campaign trail that say that this created a real problem for us, almost, not technically, but almost, like certainly doubling and almost tripling minimum wage through the course of her tenure. And what do you say to these people? And she told a story about being in a coffee shop, and it was in Calgary. And she said that the barista that made her coffee came up afterward and asked if she could get a picture. And so she said, sure. And then as they went to take the picture, she became, not Rachel, but the barista, became very emotional and turned her head away. And they had to wait to take the picture. So they went outside to find a moment of privacy, asked her what was going on. And this gal shared her story. She's a full-time student. She's working 40 hours a week on top of her course load to try to pay her bills. She's having a difficult time staying afloat. She's having a difficult time keeping up with inflation. And she was talking about how big it was to have that minimum wage increased. And so obviously you get all these different sides to the story. You get the business owners that say that really was very difficult for them to navigate. And then you have the people that are, quite frankly, living on the poverty line. That are struggling every single week talking about what a huge impact it made.
Well, I think too, I mean, when she brought it in, nobody anticipated what was going to happen in 2020. So I think, when you heard that argument being made initially when Notley first brought it in, which I think was in 2016, was the increase, people were saying, oh, well, our businesses can't handle this. But at the time, the economy was doing better for those in the tourist organizations. Now you're having them try to come back after 2.5 years of really not an enjoyable time and having, to lay off staff and all of that stuff. So I guess I can understand where they're coming from as well. But the minimum wage makes a huge difference. And Alberta is, we're not like the tippity top. I think we're third in minimum wage or maybe second. So this is not like it's an Alberta only thing. And I think that's an argument that Notley can make, is that it's actually just bringing Alberta along with all of the other provinces that have looked at raising their minimum wage over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Was there anything, I'm putting you on the spot, Johnny, but was there anything yesterday that like a storyline that you were paying attention to or something that jumped out at you, maybe something you heard in the round table that resonated with you in particular? I mean, everyone's going to start. Rick Bell is right. I mean, it's basically the election campaign kicked off officially. Yes. I mean, unofficially, but basically yesterday, right?
I don't know. I want to hear something. I think Michael was right about this, substantial from both of them. Not only Danielle Smith, but Rachel Notley. I kind of don't know where she fully stands right now. And I think Michael's right. And you are too. Danielle has totally shown her cards. She's not hiding anything right now, right? She's totally shown. So I think Rachel has kind of this lead to formulate a plan, but I just haven't heard it fully yet. I just don't fully know. And I think we were talking about this as well. What is the main issue with Rachel, right? Where we all know exactly where Daniel stands.
Affordability.
Right?
I think
affordability is a great one.
That resonated for sure. To answer the question, just a quick scan here. So Alberta's
Max
minimum
Fawcett
wage
in the chat.
now. Oh, is he?
Yeah.
What's
Hi,
Max?
Max.
What's Max saying?
He's weighing in. He said, "Oh, what did he say here?"
Keep an eye on it.
Let me scan.
Oh, yeah, Alberta, $15 an hour. BC's at $15.65. Kristen, for comparison, Northwest Territories at $15.20. They're right around that $16 and none of it.
Though the Northwest Territories and none of it aren't a good comparable, given the cost of living.
Cost of living is out of control
up
there.
My brother
people
lives
talking about like milk is like $11.
My brother lives in Yellowknife, and he was showing me his grocery bill the other day, and it was he only got, I think, 6 items, and it was almost $55-$60.
I don't know how you do it.
Fawcett saying the NDP needs to sharpen their economic message quickly.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. And there's an opportunity to do it yesterday. And so we'll see. Obviously, this is going to be a huge part of our content between now and the end of May. And we'll be telling you a little bit more about that. But we sincerely solicit your feedback. Let us know what's landing with you, what you'd like to hear more about, maybe guests you'd like to hear on the show. You can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. And in just a second, we're going to recognize it is the 1st of March, the winner of February's Email of the Month. And we're just blowing out mugs today. This is great. Dr. Mithani, Kristin Raworth, and we're going to be handing one out as well. We'll be shipping it right to this person's door, the winner of our Email of the Month. Every Wednesday, we have a chance to get out to the mountains and just give ourselves a perspective check. Let's talk about dollars and bottom lines. And isn't it nice sometimes just to fill your lungs with fresh air? You won't find any fresher than you will out in Jasper National Park. And every Wednesday, we pause for MyJasper Memories, presented by our friends at Tourism Jasper. There's always something to do in Canada's most beautiful mountain park, but because we are now into the month of March, can't even believe that, in the celebration of this new month, I wanted to highlight a couple of March's top events that are going to be going down in Jasper. Both of them happen to be at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, starting March 10th. All right, so about a week and a half from now, not this coming weekend, but the next, it is the famous Fairmont PJ Party. Yeah, that's right. You can learn more, by the way, at jasper.travel/events. This is an event back for another amazing year of ladies-only fun. I've heard that this is a barn burner every year. Bring your favorite pair of PJs and your best friends for a weekend filled with dance parties, cocktails, fabulous food, fun classes, and some well-deserved me time with you and the girls. This is a Jasper getaway you won't want to miss. An entire weekend spent in your PJs, minus the gala dinner, of course, a chance to dress it up with your favorite ladies, the ultimate girls' weekend. And then March 31st through April 2nd, you've got about a month to plan this out. to get your travel mates, book the time off, and head out to the mountains for Devour. This is the Canadian Rockies Food Film Festival. Discover a love for food, film, and, wine at this annual event happening at the incomparable Fairmont JPL. Get to know talented filmmakers, high-profile chefs from all around the world. Cozy up in the Rockies while you celebrate cinema and indulge in exquisite food and wine. That's March 31st through April 2nd. Devour, the Canadian Rockies Food Film Festival. I've heard rave reviews about this one. You can make your own Jasper memories by starting out at jasper.travel/events. And when you're posting about your experiences out there in the mountain park, we'd love for you to use the hashtag MyJasper and Real Talk RJ, and then you could see your adventures featured on a future edition of MyJasper Memories presented by Tourism Jasper. This was an email that got us all thinking. We knew it, John, the minute that this arrived in our inbox on February 2nd. Mm-hmm. This was right at the beginning of the month from Real Talker Jamie. The subject line, to drink or not to drink. That this was going to be something that would kick off conversation on the show. It led to us booking an interview with Justin Bourne, the former pro hockey player and Sportsnet personality. His new book, Down and Back, talks about his journey with alcohol and family and pro hockey and what led him to swear off booze 4 years ago and counting. It was a remarkable interview. It prompted emails from so many of you, some of you writing in heartbreaking accounts of watching your kids get high, watching your kids struggle with addiction, your own journeys. Some of them, emails you sent to us asking that we not read them on the show, but you just wanted to let us know how Jamie's email had landed. We're so grateful. Jamie talked about, she says, a 41-year-old woman in relatively good health. I've been drinking socially since I was 14. She said, responsibly drinking since my early 20s, but to me that meant, she said, not drinking and driving, not blacking out, not engaging in risky behavior, not puking, and rarely ever missing anything due to being hungover. But she went on to talk to us about how alcohol's been a part of everything she did. The sports, slow pitch, golfing, curling, vacations, tropicals, bush camping, birthdays, girls' nights out, baby showers, weddings, concerts, festivals. She said after long days in the hot tub, she said, I want to emphasize, I'm not talking about excessive drinking, not even drinking to get drunk, but drinking most of the time. Jamie, your email resonated with us so strongly, and it's our pleasure to award you officially February's Email of the Month. Hey, the studio audience loves it. And, of course, our general manager, Katie, will be in touch to ship you your ceramic mug. Wanted to let you know before we wrap today that we have some sponsors that without whom we would not be having these conversations. And I had a chance to check in with Mike from Eden Landscaping just a couple of days ago. As a matter of fact, we broke bread on Friday. You know why? Well, because we're getting them to do our backyard. Finally, we're able to hire Eden Landscaping to... I've been telling you all these testimonials, Johnny. You saw right through it when I was talking about lousy sod and uninspired landscapes and being embarrassed as you wanted to entertain people. Yeah, it was my personal account. I was talking about me. Let me tell you, meeting with Mike is such a special experience. You're not going to find somebody more passionate about problem solving than you will the team at Eden Landscaping, a custom landscape builder with more than 20 years of experience in Edmonton and area. Do exactly what we did. We're going through the process just like everybody else. It starts with a consult. He rough sketches a design. They have it rendered in 3D, and the next thing you know, they're ordering construction materials. Join us on our journey. Hey, pave the way for your own. Starting today at landscapeedmonton.ca. Our friends at Local Environmental Services are going to be presenting a conversation tomorrow that I'm really, really excited about. Have you heard about Johan Hari? Is the author of Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again? Johan's going to be joining us tomorrow on the show. He's checking in live from London. This conversation is presented by our friends at Local Environmental Services, who encourage you to keep it local. Garbage recycling and so many other community-facing services in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Still family-owned. You can check them out online today at localenvironmental.ca. If you're a professional engineer, the universe has led you to this show and this moment because you're feeling underappreciated, uninspired, and quite frankly, you're sick of where you're working right now. Meet Apex Automation. Yeah, that's right. This may be the first day of the rest of your professional life where you give people back their time. What does that mean? Well, using automation in industry and also understanding how companies that are built on valuing their employees, their talent, really can grow at unprecedented rates. Apex has tripled its team in the last 2 years. Why? Because of the industry leading that their work is doing in autonomous vehicles and machinery, advanced process controls, robotics, programmable logic controllers, all the cool stuff that the bright young talent of tomorrow is, of course, working toward. If you're finding yourself unfulfilled in your career in engineering or automation, check out apexautomation.ca today. And if you're looking to maybe achieve some of your sustainable energy goals this year, you want to maybe cut back on your reliance on the grid, that journey starts today with a visit to kubienergy.ca. A free quote from Kubi Energy can get the ball rolling on a solar energy solution to power your life. In particular, I want to refer you to their blog at kubienergy.ca, where you can learn more about what's involved in a residential, commercial, or industrial solar installation and some of the rebates that are available, including through the City of Edmonton and, of course, the Canada Greener Homes Loan. $40,000 interest-free for up to 10 years from the feds, so you can get solar panels up on your roof. Coming up tomorrow, as mentioned, Johan Hari will join us. This is a guy who basically says that we're on the road to ruin with social media and so many other things. But he's got a solution, a path forward. I can't wait for you to hear him make his case. Plus, former diplomat, former federal cabinet minister Chris Alexander on Justin Trudeau ignoring Chinese interference in Canada's democracy. That's coming up Thursday on Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjasperson.com.